Building your own gaming PC has been a bit of more of an in-reach goal for most people. Prices across the board are dropping for graphics cards, and they are most likely going to drop a lot after this week. Ethereum, which is the biggest cryptocurrency mined on GPUs, is going to be switching away from that model. It's not going to be mined anymore. So you are probably going to be seeing a lot of mined cards on the market from people that were using them to mine and now just want to sell them to get some of the cost back. Is it a good idea to buy a mined-on graphics card? There are a lot of fears out there. A lot of people seem to think that they are just going to explode, that their performance will be crap and all that sort of thing. So I did a little bit of testing. I have my own graphics card that I mined on for a year, and I ran some quick tests and compared them to the results of the review that I did on it back when I bought it new, which I will put up there on the card, and it's going to be at the end of the video on the card as well, if you are interested in seeing that video in full. I won't bore you with all the details. I'll just present you the results already, and I will explain the methodology and all that sort of stuff and all the thoughts behind it and my conclusions after the results. Quick disclaimer, the testing was not as thorough and accurate as I would like, but it still gives you an idea of what to expect. I will go into the details of why that is, why it wasn't as great as I hoped it would be after the results, but let's start with analyzing the results first. Let's start off with Ashes of the Singularity benchmark. A year ago, before I mined on the card, I was scoring a 91.1, and now I am scoring an 85.7. Quick add-in, there were no other changes in the system in terms of hardware. There were changes in hardware and software, and many changes in terms of other things in the system, which I will elaborate on after presenting you the results. So in Ashes of Singularity, there is a little bit of a drop in terms of the performance. On 3D Mark's time spy test, the drop was not very big. The graphic looks a little bit weird, so it looks like it's a massive drop, but look at the scale. The drop itself is less than 1.5%, so it's well within margin of error for my very rudimentary testing. The drop is from 1300,641 to 1300,449, so really a minimal difference in terms of performance. For Firestrike, also on 3D Mark, the difference is also very small, from 1600,951 to 1700,186. So it actually performed better now 1 year later than it did before. It's also a very small difference, once again within margin of error. We all know that there's stuff running in the background on our PCs that you can't always control. There's room temperature involved, all that sort of stuff, which I will go into afterward. Moving on to actual games, on the Shadow of Tomb Raider benchmark, so still a benchmark, but it's inside an actual game engine. The performance dropped a little bit from 127 average to 118 after a year of mining, and from 110 5% lows to 97. So there was a bit of a drop. Again, external factors are in play here, which I'll go into, but definitely in any case a drop. On The Witcher 3, playing on Ultra, I was averaging 97 FPS a year ago, and right now I'm getting 105. Similarly, the 1% lows increased from 82 to 85 after mining on the card for a year. This is kind of surprising, and it's possibly due to maybe a patch to the game that improves performance or something along those lines, or a new NVIDIA driver. Finally, playing Metro Exodus on high for a short amount of time, I was averaging 147 a year ago, and now I am getting 140 FPS. As far as the 1% lows go, and I'm using 1% and not 5, what that I used before, because 5% is what Shadows of Tomb Raider gives you as a result. As far as the 1% goes in Metro Exodus, I am scoring 92 FPS average and 97 now, so the 1% lows actually improved by a bit. Confusing results, some got better, some got worse, some got a lot worse, some got quite a bit better, so it's a mixed bag. And there is a reason for this, and why you should not take this review as absolute gospel, but it still gives you a very good idea of what to expect. The setup that I used for both reviews had no hardware changes like I mentioned, but at the same time it is my actual home gaming PC that I just use for everything really. So there have been programs installed, there's possibly processes in the background running from programs that I installed in the meantime that weren't there a year ago. There's all those sorts of variables that, as much as I can try to shut off everything that is not relevant to keep the benchmark accurate, it's a bit difficult when you don't have a dedicated test bench. So that introduces a little bit of margin of error. There's also, I, for example, upgraded to the Windows 11, to the latest version, while the previous one was on Windows 10. And there's also other things like drivers for the games, new NVIDIA drivers that came out in the meantime. There is probably updates to the games that improve performance in some way. Other sort of things, for example, on The Witcher, there was actually quite a bit of a performance improvement. Metro Exodus had higher lows, so it's a mixed bag. There's also other factors like room temperature influences how hot the graphics card gets, which influences the boost clock. I am doing this test now pretty much in the summer. It's still pretty warm here, and the original tests were done in April, which is a lot cooler. Whatever way you look at it, it's not 100% accurate, but the differences are pretty minor. In most cases, when you are talking about FPS, the differences are, 5 FPS, 7 FPS, something like that. In considering that the base number is like 147, dropping to 140, you're really not going to notice. We're not talking about dropping from 30 to 20. That's a completely different ballpark. Then you definitely notice. I would have loved to do more testing, more games, because I did test more games and more settings in the previous review that I did a year ago, but with all them moving to the new version of Windows, my MSI Afterburner started having issues. I could not get the on-screen display to work and the FPS recording to work properly, no matter how much I tried. I tried other programs that also count FPS. They were giving me issues in other games, like not even letting me launch the games, for example, Fraps, or just killing games before they even started. So given that and the fact that I wanted to get the video out quickly, this was the best that I could wrap up in a short amount of time, but it still gives you a fairly good idea. Now, as to my conclusions about this testing and these results. People's perception of mining is probably a bit skewed due to the fact that years ago, when other cryptos, like Bitcoin for example, were mined on GPUs, the graphics cards, the GPU core was getting hammered. It was a mining process that actually really stressed the graphics card, and that's not quite the case from Ethereum. Ethereum runs mostly on the memory, and actually most people that mine it and most mining softwares, they actually underclock the GPU, they overclock the memory, and they lower the voltage. This means that the graphics cards will not get very warm or very hot in the process. I was getting like maybe 59, 60 degrees at most while I was mining. So, wasn't cooking the card alive or anything. Yeah, so that already reduces a bit of stress on the GPU die itself. And the fact that it does not get very hot and that it's at a constant temperature instead of going hot cold, it also means that there is not a whole lot of material expansion from the temperature differences, meaning that there won't be as much degradation of the silicon. The performance drop that you get is not so much most likely from the card actually being degraded in any way. It's most likely a combination of other factors like all the software changes that I've had to my PC. The thermal paste probably could use a little bit of replacing, and it's just hotter in the house, so the card gets hotter as well and boosts less. That said, while I don't believe that mining has really degraded my card significantly, I do think that there are some risks involved, obviously. A card also has other parts, like moving parts, like for example the fans, that have been spinning non-stop for literally a year. So there is also the wear and tear on those parts that just builds up over time. Are you worried that the fan might just die on you? I mean, it's probably not going to die very soon, but obviously it is more. It has been used a lot more than a card that sits offline most of the day while you're at work or school or whatever, and then gets turned on in the evening for a few hours to game. With that in mind, however, you kind of have to ask yourself, how long are you expecting to keep the card? It's probably going to work just fine for several years in terms of the fans, and you probably will replace it soon anyway. There's also to keep in mind that you'll probably find these cards pretty cheap. So considering the performance drop that you see here, which is not very far off from what I would expect in a card that needs probably a thermal paste change, and that the conditions have fluctuated so much throughout the two different tests. Are you getting a good deal if you're getting it cheap? And I don't see a very good reason not to give it a go. But I do understand the apprehension, the resistance to getting a card that you think might have been mined on. There is always the possibility that the person that's been using it has not really been taking good care of it, as most people that mine tend to do when they inform themselves a little bit more and take good care of their stuff. It could be someone that just overclocked the card like crazy when it's not even necessary for the mining. It's actually detrimental. There's a lot of variables in place, but those are always in place when you are buying a used item, whether it has been mined on or just used at someone at home. Someone could have easily just overclocked their card like crazy to game. Other features like RT cores, DLSS, what are they called again, tensor cores, those won't be affected at all. There won't be anything different with those because that is literally not used at all on the mining process, so there won't be any sort of degradation or anything like that related to that, which is why I did not bother including it on the testing in terms of testing with the DLSS and RTX on, because it shouldn't really matter. They shouldn't make a very big difference. What is my advice to you guys? I'm not going to tell you to run and go and run and buy used mine graphics card. I'm also not going to tell you that you shouldn't. It's just a matter of the facts. Does it have more wear and tear? Mostly on the mechanical parts, probably a little bit. Is it going to matter for its lifespan? Most likely not. And it's probably doesn't really have much of performance impact at stock. And this is kind of an important point. At stock, all the tests that I did, both the review and the ones today, have been at stock settings that the graphics card came on. So no overclocking on it. If there is any degradation, it will probably just mean that the graphics card will overclock lower. As in, every card comes with some headroom that you can overclock it a little bit more, get a little bit more out of it. Then it comes from factory, and if there is any degradation, that margin of overclocking is probably going to absorb the difference, so to speak, so you will still hit stock performance, most likely, even if any degradation takes place. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Again, my apologies for not being able to make it more thorough. I would also have loved to do a comparison of the overclocked card from now and back then, but there was the slight issue that I didn't actually have a baseline from a year ago when the card was new, because I never actually made an overclocking results video of the card. So as much as I would love to get into that, I can't because I don't have a baseline. Also, keep in mind it's a sample size of 1. Just because my card is behaving like this and doesn't give me any issues, there probably are cards out there that did have some issues. Are those issues caused by the mining, or would they have had those issues anyway? It's a little bit up in the air. If you have a sample size of thousands of hundreds of thousands, you can probably draw some kind of statistics from it. It's difficult on a one-by-one case. If you guys have enjoyed the video and found it useful, drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel to get more content. I would love to be able to do better content, give better statistics, better graphs, more things to test and all that, and it would really help for the channel to grow a little bit and get a bit more subscriber numbers to actually get the ball rolling and helping me do that. So there's a subscribe button down below. You can always change your mind if you don't want to follow me anymore. Costs you nothing. and drop a comment down below about your experiences and what you think of the subject. And I hope I'll see you guys in the next video.